Seems like whoever I talk to just has given up on Ethereum and doesn't really believe in it anymore. And they think that this last crypto cycle from 23 to 24 just sucked. And now they're thinking we have another few years of a bear market left. If you watch my previous video on Bitcoin, you'll know that I don't think that's the case. But let's really zone in on Ethereum and see, is Ethereum dead? Is it going to become a bleeder against Bitcoin? I'm going to devote my attention tonight to looking at the ETH Bitcoin ratio. I feel like that is the most important thing to look at. Not to say that ETH USD isn't important at all. It's just, what's the point of really looking at it if ETH is in a downtrend against Bitcoin? You would just put your money in Bitcoin, right? So this is crypto simulation theory. I'm the Gaussian snake. This is not financial advice. Let's go ahead and get started with looking at Ethereum against Bitcoin. So this is the ETH Bitcoin ratio, currently at 0.01917, which is much lower than I thought it would go, to be quite honest with you. Based on VRVP data and other stuff, I thought that it would bottom out in the 0.03 to 0.04 range, and boy, how I was wrong about that. We even broke this long-term support trend line, which isn't like a great thing. But the good news is, for now, we are holding the 2019 lows. So you'll notice that there was a low put in September of 2019, another low put in January of 2020, and that was like a double bottom. And ETH looks to be kind of heading into that red zone again. As long as it bottoms somewhere in this red zone, I'm not terribly concerned. But one of the things that, of course, we do wonder about is, what if ETH Bitcoin breaks this line and heads lower and actually breaks the 2019 lows? Then you've got the 2017 lows to be challenging, and that's not really somewhere we want to go, because at that point ETH is officially a bleeder against Bitcoin. And nobody really wants to think of the number 2 crypto by market cap being a bleeder. That's not really a great scenario for Ethereum at all. So it's probably best to just kind of stay positive and look at what happened last time and kind of like think maybe something similar might happen this time. So very clearly, Ethereum is overextended to the downside. That is an understatement. This is the red concave down Gaussian channel, which is super tight. It does seem to be widening somewhat. But yeah, this just looked like ETH Bitcoin just kind of spilled out, in what I like to call like a red waterfall. Yeah, it really doesn't look good. But this has happened before. Like, we may not remember it, but in 2018, I mean, of course, that was a clear bear market. But even in 2019, like, Bitcoin went on a run of its own, and ETH Bitcoin didn't really do much. And then just kind of went straight down to a bottom in, like I said, around August, September 2019. Just to bounce right back down to another bottom. So are we looking at something different developing this time? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be that different than what happened last time. Of course, it will play out. It won't play out in the exact same way, but I'm fairly confident. And I say this, with just based on a lot of study of this metric that we're looking at, that ETH Bitcoin is going to bottom somewhere in this red zone. I'm not sure if it's bottomed yet, but I think it could be very close to achieving a bottom. If it goes outside the red zone, I'm okay with that, as long as it's nothing more than maybe just a wick or something like that. I don't want to see any weekly closes below the red zone, because then that just kind of says we've lost the 2019 lows. That's from like 6 years ago. To me, that's saying something about the Ethereum ecosystem having some issues. I mean, it doesn't really get much more bearish than this, right? Like, you've got your 200 week whole moving average acting as clear resistance. Ethereum, Bitcoin hasn't even been anywhere near it in, months, like since July of 2024. That was the last time ETH Bitcoin challenged its 200 week. And, the death cross of the 100 and 200 week happened all the way back in June of 2022. That is a really long time. I don't know if we really have much of a frame of reference for a previous death cross, because, well, we didn't have a 200 week whole moving average to really like have that, right? But we could sort of extrapolate that maybe that would have occurred sometime in 2018. It's just been a really long bear market for ETH Bitcoin. I mean, we're going on like 1,300 days of bear market. Something's got to give, right? And so why is ETH Bitcoin in such a dramatic drawdown? Why is it so overextended from all these moving averages? I mean, this is as bearish as it gets. Well, the reason has to do with the fact that we have been in a very severe quantitative tightening cycle. So if you look at interest rates, the federal funds rate, which I put in yellow, and I did an extensive analysis of this with Bitcoin. So if you're interested in that, just watch my video on Bitcoin. I'll link it after this video is over with. Make sure you set aside a lot of time for that one. That one's like about 50 minutes long. This one's not going to be nearly that long. So you can see that Ethereum Bitcoin kind of topped out right before rates started to rise. And ETH Bitcoin did not like quantitative tightening at all. It didn't like it. And it didn't like rates being held higher for longer. Now, curiously, you might wonder why ETH Bitcoin continued to drop on the first series of rate cuts. You would think that that signaled to the market that it's risk on, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the market right now, right? Like there's tariffs on everything. That's something to consider. And we also have to look at the fact that, the global liquidity hasn't really increased that much relative to 2021, right? It's just kind of come back full circle. I talked about this also in my Bitcoin video, so I don't want to be too repetitive. But we can learn maybe, like we are anticipating more rate cuts. Like, in fact, I'll pull that data up for you so you can at least see. I have to say, this data is all over the place. Like, if you look at my Bitcoin video that I just did a few days ago, like the probability of a rate cut for the May 7th FOMC meeting was a lot higher than 15.6%. It was closer to 30%, and now it's dropped. And so market participants are thinking, you know what, the Fed's probably going to go higher for longer. Frustrating, right? I don't think ETH Bitcoin is going to like this, right? Like, I don't. Does it mean ETH Bitcoin is going to drop more? Not necessarily, but I just don't see any strength coming from it until we see clear signs of quantitative easing. Now, May 7th is still a ways away. It's only April 15th, so these probabilities could change quite a bit. If we look at the probabilities, though, going into June, I mean, it seems like cuts are almost a certainty, and there's even some pricing in of a 50 basis point cut. So this is telling me that it is very likely, based on what happened in the past with ETH Bitcoin, which we're going to cover next, that ETH Bitcoin could put in a definitive bottom this quarter. And I think that is likely to happen. My hope is that we preserve the 2019 lows. I think we will, because what is likely to occur is what occurred in 2019, which is ETH Bitcoin bottomed 6 months before Bitcoin bottomed. Let me say it again. ETH Bitcoin, and I'll show you, it bottomed 6 months before Bitcoin bottomed. And I want you to take a look at what the federal funds rate was doing during that time, and you'll kind of get an idea of why I'm calling for an ETH Bitcoin bottom to happen this quarter, because I'm fairly sure that if we don't get a rate cut in May and we have the sell in May and go away, I think that ETH Bitcoin is likely to bottom sometime between now and June. I'm probably closer to June than now, right? I do think ETH Bitcoin could potentially find a bottom now. I mean, I'm not saying it won't, but it's like, well, what's the reason for it finding a bottom? People need to feel like they can convert their Bitcoin to Ethereum without anxiety. And the only way they're going to feel comfortable doing that in mass is if they can kind of see that a risk on season is coming. And I think that's what you're kind of seeing here is like, okay, we get the first cut in June, then another cut in July, potentially another cut after that in September. And so half two of the year is just full of rate cuts. And then we have a rate cut floor kind of like around 2026. And 2026 could be just a really epic bull run, right? The stock market's probably going to have some trouble. This could also, we could be falling into a recession. And I'm not saying like Ethereum USD is going to do well or your altcoins are going to do well against USD, but we could start to see the shift taking place from risk off to risk on. And that's what I think is very likely to be happening in half two of this year. Half one has sucked, but I think half two won't necessarily suck the entire way. And I think Bitcoin will bottom before the stock market does. And I think Ethereum is likely to find relative strength before Bitcoin bottoms. Now, I can't tell you when Bitcoin's going to bottom, and I can't tell you when the stock market's going to bottom. That's unpredictable, but this is helping us get there, a rate cut cycle. This is exactly what we need. And it looks like the market is pricing in somewhere around 300 to like 350 basis points as a potential floor for rate cuts. Of course, we've also got the Trump tariffs and, the potential inflation that could bring along with it. But a lot of that, is kind of in flux. So I'm not going to talk about things that I really don't like fully understand. So, and tariffs are just too touch and go right now. I want to bring your attention to a time period that I feel was very similar to what we're going through now. And it's the closest thing we have. So it is worth studying. I don't know if all these lines are distracting you. I think what I'm going to do is turn off some of these moving averages just because I don't really feel like they're that relevant to my discussion. I'll leave the trend line on. But again, the yellow metric is the federal funds rate. And you can see the scale for it is right here. Now, back in, excuse me, you can see back in 2017, we had that epic bull run by Bitcoin and Ethereum. When it looked like, inflation was becoming a problem again, the Fed started raising rates, and ETH Bitcoin did not like it. And you can see that there was somewhat of a freeze that happened in, I would say, from January of 2019 to July of 2019. And during this time, Bitcoin did very well. Bitcoin had its own bull market, and that bull market took Bitcoin to $14,000, just 70% of the all-time high, which is impressive considering how quickly it happened. It was an echo bubble. But look what happened. The Fed started cutting rates just like they're doing now. ETH Bitcoin didn't like it. It went down even more, right? ETH Bitcoin wants to see that a floor is coming. But it was on the second series of cuts, right, that ETH Bitcoin found its bottom, and it could have already found its bottom for all we know, right? But it had to come back down and test those lows again. Bottom of ETH Bitcoin was in September of 2019. The second bottom was in January of 2020. Now, here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that ETH Bitcoin put in a higher low relative to the lows of 2019 in March of 2020. And if you remember March of 2020, that was the COVID drop. That was the recession. See, Bitcoin's been through a recession before. Bitcoin bottomed in March of 2020. Ethereum bottomed against Bitcoin in September of 2019. And then there was another double bottom in May of 2020. So you have a series of double bottoms, but ultimately higher lows, right? And what do you notice? Quantitative easing. Ethereum loves that. This is great for risk on assets. So if you were to try to delineate what's going on here, right, and try to sort of put a label on it, right, you could say that the market was a risk-off bull market. I'm going to call it that, from January of 2019 to roughly, I don't really remember when Bitcoin bottomed out, but we'll just say July of 2019, something like that. So it was roughly 6 months, 6 or 7 months, where you had a risk-off bull market. And what was happening during that time? Well, Bitcoin dominance was high, and ETH Bitcoin was basically not doing anything exciting. It was bleeding. All right, and so this was not a good time for altcoins. And we can get into altcoins in a separate video, right? My videos are already long enough as it is. We come over here. This is basically, well, actually, let's not get lazy. I can do a new text box. Okay, so this is your 2019, early 2019. And then, and I'm talking about just the crypto market in general. You're not necessarily seeing this play out with ETH Bitcoin itself. ETH Bitcoin, I'm just saying it was falling. Let's make this font a little smaller. That's too small. Let's go to 20 maybe. Okay, another text box. Okay, then in late 2019, early 2020, I would argue this is your bear market, which is a transition from risk off to risk on. Okay, it's a bear market. It's a transition from risk off to risk on. And that transition is painful. And we know that it resulted in a pretty nasty drop by Bitcoin. But Ethereum sniffed out, or I should say people sniffed out, market participants knew quantitative easing was likely coming as early as September of 2019. And that's why ETH Bitcoin bottomed then. And I feel as soon as market participants know that rate cuts are coming again, they're going to do that same thing. ETH Bitcoin could already be bottoming, right? So then what happened? Well, starting in, I would say half two of 2020, we got a risk on bull market. And the risk on bull market, that lasted really from half two of 2020 all the way to half two of 2021. So you got a good year of a risk on bull market. And what happened during this time is Bitcoin dominance started to fall. Now, it didn't fall dramatically, but it fell. and you have ETH Bitcoin in a bull market. And we already know we had an epic altcoin season. We had a few of them, right? So epic altcoin seasons. These are the altcoin seasons that made life-changing wealth. Now fast forward to today, okay? And let's talk about what's been going on in the market. Okay, we know that Bitcoin put in its cycle bottom in December of 2022, okay? And from January of 2023 to December of 2024, we've had an elevated federal funds rate, right? I don't know where to put this text box, maybe here. We've an elevated federal funds rate. We've finally got inflation under control. Of course, we've got the tariffs to deal with. I can't go there right now, but let's just let's not focus too much on them. But basically you had a risk off bull market. Okay. And so I'd argue this happened from half one of 2023 to half two 2024. Okay. So all the way, arguably trouble started in March of 2024, right? With Bitcoin putting in that significant top. And Ethereum put in a lower high relative to its all-time high, but it's a risk-off bull market. People are not taking on too much risk. Yes, there were altcoins popping off. Yes, Solana did technically put in a new all-time high, barely, but nothing really did anything that exciting for that long. Like, of course, you've always got your outliers. You've got things like Pepe and Bonk and Whiff, and yeah, those did great, but overall, it was really hard to make money. Like, you had to be very fast and loose, and it felt like the rules had almost changed, and maybe they've changed forever. I don't know. But I think starting in, you could say it started in March. Honestly, you could say it started in March of 2024, but I'm going to say that the bull market ended in December of 2024. And I would say where we're at right now is a transitional bear market. And this could include a possible recession. Okay. And this, I believe, will last from half one of 2025 to sometime in half two of 2025. I can't tell you when. It is possible it goes longer. Okay, it's possibly longer. I don't think it's going to last longer than a year. So the last transitional bear market lasted from September of 2019. Well, arguably July, August-ish, somewhere in there, somewhere in quarter three of 2020, of 2019 to about a year. Okay, so about a year. So it could go longer. We could head into 2026. That is possible, right? But we expect during this time that ETH Bitcoin will bottom. Okay. And then my guess is probably around 2026. It's really hard to say exactly where. I can't time this, but I think we get our risk on bull market because it looks like the market is pricing in a rate cut floor at the end of this year. Now, the reason why I say it could happen in half two of 2025, it is possible. I'm not sure, right? Like, I just don't know. The market participants are so fickle. The Fed has to pay attention to Trump and the tariffs. We have to make sure they keep inflation down. There's just a lot of things going on, but I'm fairly certain we're heading into quantitative easing, okay? So we're going to likely get a risk-on bull market in 2026. Which I know is like breaking the 4-year cycle, but I never believed in the 4-year cycle anyway. Like, go look at my video, Bitcoin cycle theory, the cycle theory lie. It's one of my first videos on this channel, and you'll see that I don't really believe in it. And if it did exist, it's not going to exist forever. So how long will this bull market go on for? I think longer than, we will have just been coming out of a really nasty ETH Bitcoin bear market. And the nice thing is the Fed's not going to cut rates to zero, right? They're going to cut to 3 something. So I don't think inflation is going to rear its head necessarily as soon as people might think. So this risk on bull market could last, who knows, maybe 2 years? Could last till 2027. I don't know. I'm not going to give you an end date, but it could last longer than we think. Now, I think it's going to be slower altcoin seasons, slower Ethereum growth. But ultimately, it's going to be the same thing that we're all used to, which is, possible blow off top and everyone is a genius phase. I do think there will come a time where it's going to be hard to find an altcoin that isn't going up. Okay. I just think it's going to take longer. And I think we're going to see ETH Bitcoin in a bull market. And I would say it's generally a good time for altcoins. So I don't know if it's going to last 2 years. Like I'm flexible to think that this could last maybe a year and a half, but I think it's going to go longer than the last one because we're not going to be as likely to experience the kind of inflation that led, like, I doubt we're going to go straight back into quantitative tightening. And the only way that that does happen, right, where we do go into quantitative tightening, right? So the only way that QT returns aggressively, let's say like maybe after 6 to 12 months or something. Well, sorry, you can't see what I'm writing. I can't see what I'm writing. After 6 to 12 months is with a stagflationary market. And I talked about stagflation in my last video a little bit on Bitcoin. Again, I'll link that at the end of this one. That's just when you have inflation rising and you have basically recessionary market conditions. And it's really tough. Like the Fed just has to start, they have no choice but to raise rates. And then that throws us into a bear market. And the cycle just keeps repeating. You know, and we don't want that. That happened in the 1970s. Honestly, it's preventable. It's just a question of whether this administration is going to do the right thing or not. So, yeah, I really think this is kind of my thoughts, you know, and you can note these and take these down. And I'm really hesitant to give you like price predictions about, you know, Ethereum, but I think that Ethereum Bitcoin will stand the test of time being an oscillator. I don't think it's going to be close, folks. Like, I mean, like, let's turn on some Heiken Ashi candles and see. Let's go to a 2-week time frame first of all. Let's zoom out. Okay, and let's throw on some Heiken Ashis. Oh, I'm sorry, this is just full. Let me get rid of these text boxes. Hold on. So 2-week Heiken Ashi is a really great way of tuning out noise and just focusing on trend, doing some trend analysis. You can see that ETH Bitcoin has had some pretty nasty red waterfalls in the past, right? Like this was the de facto bear market of 2018. And then this was actually a Bitcoin bull market, right? The Bitcoin risk off bull market of 2019. Bitcoin did great during this time. Everything else sucked. So I feel like we have a similar situation now, right? Like the Bitcoin risk off bull market really kicked off in January, and look, ETH Bitcoin didn't care. It just bled. So that's just basically saying, hey, you know what? Good for you, Bitcoin, but everything else is dying. I feel like we should see where this undershadow falls for this 2-week time period we're in right now. We just got into this 2-week time period recently, but where does this close? If we see this Heiken Ashi candle on the 2-week close with a higher low relative to this one, right? Relative to the wick, because these are Heiken Ashis. That to me is a sign we could be seeing potentially a first bottom. I do think that ETH Bitcoin is likely to at least test that bottom once, right? So I don't see, like, I think we'll get some kind of mean reversion, right? Like I think that is likely. If I throw a Gaussian channel on, you can see that Gaussian channel is very much red, tight, concave down. I mean, that's bearish. But we could get an inflection in that channel. I mean, the only way that would even happen at this point is if Bitcoin does start to go up. Okay. It is so overextended. And this is on a 2-week time frame. So I would take this time frame pretty seriously. So overextended, right? Like you have to think that a mean reversion bounce is coming sooner or later. All right, look at the Gunnar EMA. I mean, bear market resistance band. It's just like unbelievable. It's like this is SAR. Let's look at the SAR. Like, look at that aggressive downtrend. But it's really rhyming a lot with 2018 and 2019. I mean, I just can't help but notice that. And I feel like history is playing out again in a similar way to what it did here, just a little less volatile. So whether we bottom at 0.019 or we go a little lower, even to test the 2019 lows, which I really don't want to see that happen. I don't mind if we get just a little bit above them. That's fine. But like, I can't tell you what the bottom is going to be, but really you got to watch every Heiken Ashi candle on the 2-week from this point onward. And if you don't understand Heiken Ashi candles and how they work, I suggest you read up about them. They're very useful. Another thing I want to look at on the 2-week time frame is the RCMO. You know, I love the RCMO. It's one of my favorite indicators. I used it with Bitcoin. It looks like I already had it on. Let's look at this. Like we're actually in the process of putting in a higher low relative to December 2023, a higher low. So we could be seeing some bullish divergence already starting to take place. Like this takes place on a very like low time frame. I also want to show you the wave trend on the oh, they changed the name of it. Hold on, let me find it. This is the oscillator wave trend, and you can see ETH Bitcoin has printed 1, 2, 3 bullish divergence dots. Now each of these failed, but one of these is going to take hold. We have not been in the red zone for quite some time. Like we have not been up here since January of 2022. That's over 3 years ago. And the lag from the last one was like you went from July of 2017 to about June of 2021. So about 4 years. So it's really crazy how long this is taking. And it's because of this that I think our next bull market for Ethereum is going to go longer than a year. Because I think it's going to take longer to get to the top this time than it has in the past. Look, I could be wrong about that, but we're setting up a really nice bottoming structure here. You have to think like this is going to end up being like a quadruple bottom. That's a really strong bottom for this metric. So I really like what I'm seeing there. Another thing to look at would be the tricks bubble and to kind of see if there's anything maybe going on suggesting a bottom could be forming right now. No, not really. It's just thing just keeps going lower. Now it's on a 2-week time frame, so you have to multiply everything by 2. Let's be like the 10 week and all the way up to, oh man, I have to do math in my head right now, to 28 week. Okay, so we're not really seeing things turn around just yet, but doesn't mean it could happen. So that's kind of a useless metric at the moment. Let me see if I can think of anything else to really look at. I mean, I don't think so. I think the ones I just looked at, probably ADX and DI might be a good one to just. Oh no, let's look at the average sentiment oscillator. The bear bubble is huge. Look at this thing. You rarely see bear bubbles this high. It is now matching levels from December of 2018. So I doubt this is sustainable. I really do. I think this bear bubble is going to collapse. And now I want to look at the ADX and DI. Yeah, I mean, the ADX has already made the cross like a long time ago in September of last year. Made the cross. Trend strength is still going up, meaning we still have a fairly aggressive downtrend. Note that the red DI hasn't been moving as aggressively as the trend strength. So, this definitely matches what I'm seeing with the average sentiment oscillator. Look, all signs point to ETH Bitcoin finding a bottom soon. I mean, I think Q2, this quarter that we're in right now, is a likely candidate for a bottom. And I think it's pretty likely we stay within this red zone. Like, if we fall out of it, I'm going to have to address that in a separate video, but I don't want to be pessimistic about it. So that's my take on Ethereum. I know I didn't look at ETHUSD. I will look at ETHUSD when I feel like, maybe things are turning around. It's just, if you're going to hold anything, it's like, well, you would hold Bitcoin right now. Now, would you want to convert some of your Bitcoin to Ethereum? Like, I can't offer you financial advice. That's obviously a personal decision, but it never hurts to kind of scale in, right? You could always scale in if you believe that Ethereum's coming back. I really don't even think we've had our proper bull market yet. I think we had 2019 to 2020. That's what we just experienced. I am convicted of that. And I believe that 2026 to 2027 or 28, or maybe late 2025 onward to 2027 or something like that is going to be the bull market that we've all been waiting for. And it's going to throw a lot of people off guard, especially if it comes on the back of a recession, which I think, whether it's a recession or just a bear market, I just think it's going to throw a lot of people off guard. People will have given up. And it's like the worst time to give up. So I'm very optimistic about Ethereum heading into half 2, at least finding a bottom against Bitcoin. And I think Ethereum can really start to outperform once we're closer to a rate cut floor. And that seems to be like somewhere around the end of this year into 2026. So until then, unfortunately, there's probably still going to be some pain in the market, but you may start to see Ethereum outperforming Bitcoin long before Bitcoin finds a bottom. So I hope you found this helpful. And, please share this content. I like to see my videos get a little bit more engagement for the amount of work that I put into them. So if you could just share with the groups that you're a part of, I'd really appreciate that. And also, I'd love to see you in my Telegram group, Crypto Simulation Theory Telegram. We've got 330 awesome people there. and I'd love to have you. Everything I'm doing on here is free. You know, I'm just really passionate about charts and studying the market, and I have your best interest in mind. So yeah, if you could just help me with that and just like, comment, if you have any thoughts, really would appreciate that too. Okay, I wanted to keep this shorter than the last video. No, I went back for about a half hour this time. So I'll put the video for Bitcoin. You can watch it. Until then, you know, have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next.